Here we are in WatchBox Studios with a very special guest today. My very good friend, Mike Shanlickian, a very big watch collector. Mike, so happy to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, George. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again. I haven't seen you personally in a couple of years, and this is my first time to the WatchBox Studios and my second visit to one of my favorite cities, which is Philadelphia.
Awesome.
So it's great to be here.
Yeah, we're super happy to have you.
Thank
and
you.
It's funny, you know, you're somewhat of a celebrity in the watch industry as Shanny Watch, your Instagram account. You know, it's funny. You walk around the building now and you say, "This is Shanny Watch." You're like, oh, he has an amazing collection. So it's pretty funny that put a face behind the name and the account.
It's been a lot of fun with social media and sharing, sharing my watches. I think I started posting on Instagram a little bit later, probably in 2017 or 18. But I've been collecting the independent watch brands since the early 2000s. So it's a pleasure sharing with everybody. I really enjoy it.
So you brought some really cool watches with you today that I'm sure people would love to see. So let's go through them all. First and foremost, you have what could be my single grail, either that or the Jade Dial TN. But tell us about the Ruby.
Yes, yeah. So always happy to share, George. So what I have on my wrist right now is the FP Journe Tourbillon reference TN. So the second reference, his first reference was reference T. This is kind of the second generation and the last of the second generation. So the Ruby dial made with ruthenium subdials was made in a limited edition of 20 to wish the TN farewell and to introduce the Tourbillon Vertical,
right,
which is the current production reference. I do have it on a platinum bracelet, giving it a nice weight to it, but a very special piece. Every piece is going to be unique because of the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Based on my discussions with FP himself, this is the most complicated dial he's ever made. It's been a complete headache for him.
Right.
A lot of error rates to it. And it's questionable whether he will ever do a Ruby dial again. That's how complicated this one was.
Right, it was that difficult for them to produce. I know a lot of their dials are difficult to produce, even down to like the Chronometra Blue. I believe the success rate is 20% on that. So, and I love that he just never compromises anything. He has a very high standard, and if it's not what he wants it to be, he just doesn't do it. I mean, that's why he didn't come out with the QP for 4 years, because it wasn't snapping like you wanted it to. And I like that he'll never settle. What else do you got here? You have
So I have some more really personal watches that I brought to share with everyone. So let's start with the predecessor to the TN. So I mentioned the T. So this is an FP Journe reference T. This is one of the first, call it 100 tourbillons that FP Journe made. And one of the characteristics that determine that are the big screws that are on the dial. This is a 38 millimeter platinum case, pink gold dial. So unofficially, we've tracked, there's a group of us that have tracked that there's about 5 of these known to be in existence. This one is very rare with the pink dial. There could be more, but unofficially right now we've tracked that there's only 5 pink dial Ts.
Yeah, that's a special one. You don't see very many of the rose dials, but then on top the big screw. That watch is amazing, and that you can just feel the character in that watch in the early days of the brand. It's amazing.
So I call this one the Pink Panther.
I like it.
What I've nicknamed this one.
On a signature purple Shanny strap, to match your socks that you wear sometimes, right?
One of my favorite colors, purple, of course. Yes.
Love it.
So great watch. I've had it for many years. Bought it on a private sale, and it's a very special watch.
Awesome.
So the next watch I'll share with you, and we'll stay with FP Journe. This is the FP Journe Optimum, which is reference CO. This is an iconic watch for FP Journe because it kind of takes his vision of all of his works and best practices with other watches, and he's kind of put it into one watch that he called the Optimum. So constant force mechanism, extremely accurate.
As accurate on the first second as it's winding down as the last second, right?
That's correct. Yep. Constant force throughout the entire cycle. And, with me, simple is better. I like simple watches, which is why I was immediately attracted to the watch. And that's why I wanted to do something personal with this specific reference. So I was in Geneva, and I had the opportunity to visit with François-Paul and collaborate with him, on an idea. So what we came up with was a ruthenium dial, black subdial, and then you'll see the red S for number 8, real subtle twist to it, and then the red dashes on the seconds, which kind of ties it all in with the power reserve. So he made me something, really personal with what I would consider probably my favorite Journe. I'd probably say the Optimum
that says something
is
too
my
with
favorite
what you
Journe.
have. Yeah, no, that watch is amazing. It's awesome. You guys did a great job designing that one, and even down to the strap, pulling in the red with the red stitching. That's a winner for sure.
Yeah, and then having it delivered sight unseen, just sketching something out, and then having it
that was
showed
like
up
Christmas morning, I'm sure.
Was very special. So, and then another very personal and special watch is my Roger Smith Series 2. So I learned about Roger Smith pretty early as I started to learn about George Daniels. And finally, I sent Roger's wife an email, Caroline, and both Roger and Caroline, both wonderful people and great to work with. And, I decided I had a couple of ideas at the time between getting the George Daniels anniversary or a Series 2. I decided to order his Series 2. Has the MK1 movement, the original movement. He has since enhanced it to an MK2 movement. Very personal watch. We customized it. I customized it with Roger over the phone. A lot of the characteristics are a bit of a copy from the Great Britain watch. So no chapter ring. The applied floating numerals, the blued numerals, the blued hands. And with Roger, he blues to a purple hue,
right?
Which is
right up your alley.
Very complicated.
Yeah,
very complicated. 3 different gear-shaped patterns.
Yep. I can see that just from the angle I'm looking at it. With the power reserve, it's a different texture than the rest of the dial, and then obviously the sub-dial.
Yep. So, Roger and I back and forth over the phone and emails, and then one day I get an email that says it's ready, and I flew over to the Isle of Man and met. Roger picked me up from the airport. It was the first time I met him. Had a great lunch with him. Spent a lot of time talking about the history of watchmaking and kind of his training with George Daniels and his watchmaking process. And then he took me to his workshop and showed me his workshop. I met all of his watchmakers, and then
what a cool experience.
Yeah, it was great.
Something I think Danny has commented on where I think he's right is I think people would appreciate learning more about the people behind the brands. And with independent watchmakers, they are the brands, if they're even, you want to refer to them as a brand, the Philippe Dufour and Roger Smith. But I think it would be cool to meet the guys who make the grand complications for Patek Philippe, the enamelists, enamelers, I should say.
I met them. I did meet them.
Yeah, well, you got to go. I know you got to go to their facilities, not just their factory in Geneva. Their operation is unbelievable, just state of the art in every way. But I think that's part of the reason why people are attracted to independent watchmakers is just because you're on that personal level with them, and I think that people would be drawn more to the brand if they could see behind the scenes a little more. How did you get into independent watch brands? Like, what attracted you to them, and how did you decide that you wanted to start collecting them?
So I started collecting watches, right out of college. And I started with I started on the traditional path. My first watch was a Tag Heuer, a chronograph, Tag Heuer, 38 millimeter. Then I moved my way into Rolex. And then from there, I started to learn about independent watchmaking through the George Daniels book. And I think my attraction to independent watchmaking, I would attribute it to my father. My father was a tailor, so he was a craftsman, and he worked on a bench, and he made bench-made suits and bench-made shirts, and I grew up in his shop. So I kind of always had, an eye for a craft and really handmade, well-made pieces, as opposed to mass produced. Right. And I think that's kind of what got my eye going into independent watchmaking, and it was probably the early 2000s when I learned about George Daniels, Roger Smith, F.P. Journe, Philippe Dufour, so on and so forth.
What was your first independent watch brand watch that you purchased?
The first one I purchased was in the mid 2000s. It was an F.P. Journe Resonance, an RN. So the
Res 2,
40 millimeter platinum gray dial, beautiful, loved it.
Yep.
The Resonance obviously was a defining watch for F.P. Journe, and that was my first one.
Right, and that's since become a major icon, but it's interesting. F.P. Journe is how we met, and we've had a fun run. Sold you a few pieces. You introduced me to several different people who were F.P. Journe collectors. It's interesting watching the rise of that brand, and I think that you would probably agree with me that the success of Journe has pulled up all the rest of the independent watch brands. I think that people have seen how well they've done and the fascination that people have for his watches. And it also has created consumer confidence for others to buy brands, other independent watch brands. For instance, I saw an article that I shared with you on what is the next F.P. Journe. And now you have all these people gravitating towards independent watch brands because I think, similar to like what you said, I think there's an attraction to something that is handmade, more unique,
personal.
Exactly,
Very
more
personal.
personal, and more limited, as opposed to mass produced. And so, what do you think is the answer to that question? What do you think is the next big independent watch brand?
I think F.P. Journe is in a class of their own, because you have an independent watchmaker who's also a relative to independent watchmakers is a brand. Okay, so if we name some of the other independent watchmakers like Roger Smith from the Isle of Man, Philippe Dufour, from the Valley du Joux in Switzerland, and Rexhep from Akrivia. Yep. These guys are not going to build more than 50 to 60 watches a year. Roger Smith closer to 10. Whereas F.P. Journe is, anywhere between 700 and 900. So right. It'll be interesting to see if there's going to be another independent that can be in that class.
Right, that can become branded. I remember, I think FP himself said it really well when he said, we're the largest independent watchmaker and the smallest brand. Yes. And I guess I should be careful referring to independent watchmakers as a brand because a lot of them aren't really. I mean, FP Journe is definitely the most commercial independent watchmaker, I think. I mean, boutiques all over the world, and really created a strong brand name, particularly over the last couple years. You've had the pleasure of meeting a bunch of the independent watchmakers. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's fascinating you telling me how you've met Philippe Dufour, Roger Smith, FP Journe, of course, and the list goes on. I mean, tell us about some of those interactions that you've had with them.
Yeah, I've had some great experiences, and like I always say, what's most important about collecting is the experience, because the material itself, although it's exciting, it's short term, but I like to say memories are eternal. They last forever. For me, before there was social media, there was the forums, okay? And back in the early 2000s, I was following, the Purist Pro forums.
Right.
And it was really there where I learned about FP Journe and some of the other independent watchmakers. And, although FP Journe is extremely popular now, there's always been a cult following, a much smaller group, but a cult following. And a lot of these guys, were based in New York. And just through following a lot of them, in the forums over time, I was able to meet with them, become friends with them. A lot of them are good friends of mine now. And then from there, was able to be invited to a lot of the events. So I think I met François-Paul in probably 2000, I want to say 2011 time frame, just through these different events. And then by going to the different events and making friends with a lot of different people and purchasing the watches, I was able to develop relationships with some of the watchmakers and then participate in organizing a tour. So I think it was in 2018 or 2017, we did a Geneva tour where, we flew into Geneva, visited FP Journe. From there, we visited Roman Gautier, and then from there, Philippe Dufour, Vianney Halter, Kerry Voudalinen, Debethune. I mean, it was an epic tour. Anyone who was a part of it, there was probably about 25 of us, and anyone who was a part of it says, we gotta do it again.
That's so cool. Yeah, you were onto those brands early, and it's amazing how much they've developed since that time period over the last decade. I remember you told me, and I couldn't help but laugh when you did, that part of the reason why you got into independent watchmakers was they were the most affordable, right? Back then.
At the time.
Right. I mean, that has since changed dramatically. What independent watchmakers do you have pieces from?
I have a Philippe Dufour Simplicity, a very popular, well-finished watch from Philippe Dufour that he started making, I think, around 2004, probably made less than about 210 of them. I just recently got my AK-06 from Akrivia in titanium.
I think he could be the next FP Journe when people talk about, the next greatest watchmaker. Young, seems to have a vision. Everyone that buys his watches raves about him. I know that you were sending me tons of pictures showing the hand-hammered dial and just the industrial look and finishing. He I think has, he's special.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He has the talent, the craftsmanship. He's very charismatic. He's very personable. So I do see him as somebody who could definitely grow. The only thing I'll tell you though is he has personally told me he doesn't have aspirations of making that many watches.
Right.
But in terms of his talent, he is at at that next level.
Right. He's a case in point of an independent watchmaker, not necessarily an independent watch brand. There are very few independent watchmakers that want to brand themselves, and I think it's Moser really. I think that they can become branded, sure. And Dufour. People don't realize that they have one of the best watchmakers in the world in Denis Flageolet behind the brand, and he sort of, hides behind the brand name, doesn't want the spotlight. With Journe, you have this crazy character who I think people attract to, but he doesn't want to be out in front of people, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that they have 10 patents, they have 26 unique calibers, and have come up with 20 different world firsts, make 90% of their components all in-house. I think that if they pivot a little bit on their aesthetic, because some of them are a little Star Trek look and a little bit too funky, but if they make a little bit more classic looking pieces with while keeping them branded, making their signature flex lugs and stuff like that, I think that brand could get a lot of traction moving forward.
Yeah, so I visited their workshop. That was one of our stops, Debethune. I met Danny. He actually signed my independent watchmaking book. I've posted my book with all of the signatures. I get autographs from all of the watchmakers that I've met so far. And I would agree with you. If you visit their factory and really understand what they're doing, where they're at, they really are ahead of things. Not, like you said, not classic. So maybe if they reach a middle ground with their innovation and their classic, then maybe they can become a lot more mainstream.
How does a watch become on your list, something that you want to acquire?
So with me, a watch starts with the dial. I'm very attracted to the dial. It's the first thing you look at.
Right.
Obviously, I like colors. I like texture. I like the ruthenium sparkle, the older ruthenium sparkles that they have. I like guilloche. I like the handmade, the hand, wheeled guilloche patterns. So these are the types of things that attract me when I'm looking at a watch. The specific characteristics of the watch itself.
Got it. And your passion really resonates. I mean, something that just came to mind was, you were talking about it briefly earlier, how all these events that you go to, it's always about the people, not about the watches. And I think that your enthusiasm is contagious. I mean, you've made me increasingly enthusiastic about Journe independent watchmaking. You helped me in my process towards getting a resonance that I have today. I mean, we looked at how many different variations, and
got it beautiful.
I'm happy where we landed on this one. But tell me how you think now things are going to unfold moving forward with independent watchmaking, independent brands. What do you think is the future for them now? I know it's hard to predict, but and I think the watch industry has changed so much even since COVID. Really, I mean, we were saying you and I haven't seen one another since our event in Chicago, which was a blast, and hopefully we can get back to doing similar events soon.
Well, I think moving forward, we have to get back to the norm, and being able to get out and collaborate with our friends and our collectors, and with the watchmakers. I get the question all the time. How do I start? How do I get started? You have a lot of cool watches. And what you got to remember is that I've been collecting for well over 20 years now.
Right.
And I was fortunate to get started with the independent watchmakers, which are in high demand right now. But what I tell everybody is, you need, number one, purchase a piece, get a watch, and then after that, get involved, because it is about the people. Get involved with a watch club. There's many different watch clubs that are out there. Make friends. And then from there, once you have a nice network of friends, the way you and I have developed a good network with a lot of other various friends that we have. Then you're able to gain more insight, more information, understand what's coming out in advance of everybody else, and that gives you maybe a foot up on being able to get a special piece. Also, it allows you to trade with friends. You have some watches that over time you want to trade for something else, and once you've kind of developed that network, you're able to do that. And then also, when you have a good network and you develop relationships with the watchmakers, and believe me, the watchmakers have a deep appreciation for their customers and for individuals who want something that's personal. Because I think that's the attraction, the shift to the independent watchmakers is having something that's really personal. And that was one of the things I did with a couple of the watches here, with my Roger Smith and with my my FP Journe Optimum. It was met with both of them and collaborated with them on the design of the watch.
Right, and I'm sure that it increases your level of appreciation knowing who made it, seeing them on their ground floor, having been at their factories. I've seen pictures of you with all those various guys, and just the passion is contagious, and you're somebody who has influenced a lot of people, and it really resonates. All right, well, Shanny, that was awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time, coming to see us in Philly, showing us some of your watches, and now it wouldn't be right if we don't grab a Philly cheesesteak before you get out of here. So
I haven't eaten in 2 days. I've been waiting for these Philly cheesesteaks. A couple years ago when I brought my family, that's all I ate, and I've been dreaming about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure it won't disappoint, and you'll be plenty full afterwards.
Thank you for having me, George. It's a
pleasure.
Really.
Thank you.
Thank you.